Hey, I'm Matt Nichols, and welcome to the Mr. Maple Show.
And I'm Tim Nichols, and we greatly appreciate you watching our videos.
Hey, today we're going to do one of our most requested videos, probably of all time. We're going to talk about general care for pruning Japanese maples. Now, we'll first get into why you prune a Japanese maple.
Why would you prune a Japanese maple? There's a lot of different reasons why you'd want to prune a Japanese maple. One is to increase vigor. When you prune a Japanese maple, you make a Japanese maple more vigorous, and it pushes on new growth. So if you would like the plant to put on a lot more new growth, pruning is a great way to do that.
Yeah, that's going to get those roots expanding. It's going to establish that root ball in the ground. It's going to give the tree some vigor overall. You know, Buddy Lee, I was once at a conference, and he had something genius to say. Of course, he was talking about his encore azaleas, but the point was so well. He said, you only want to prune a plant, especially deciduous plants, and he was talking about azaleas in this instance, in times when you could fertilize. And I think that's excellent advice for Japanese maples, because you are going to increase the growth rate. You're going to create an immediate growth response to that pruning. It's going to flush, and you only want to do it in times when you want to activate growth. That's why we don't prune in the fall, because we don't want to encourage the trees to put on flushes of new growth going into winter. There's a lot of different opinions out there about when to prune, and what we'll go over today are basically what works for us. You know, we joke about it when the grafting times that if you have 10 different grafters in a room, there'll be 10 different opinions on how to do it. And this is what's worked for us and our success. And as always, it's just the beginning of the discussion. You can continue the discussion in the comment section below. But these are some things that have given us success in pruning Japanese maples, and some of the reasons why, and some of the reasons how. But we prefer early spring. We're actually here in March 15th, so we're in mid to late March. That's when we recommend pruning Japanese maples. We're in western North Carolina. We do get a little bleed out during this time frame, but it heals so much quicker. That time frame on Japanese maple healing is down to about 7 days versus about 3 weeks during other times of the year. So you're really cutting down on that time where the tree is actually an open wound. It's at its most rejuvenative stage, so they're the easiest time, you know, for a graft to heal, so it's also the easiest time for the plant to heal.
Yeah, and with Japanese maples, this is the time to do it. I mean, if you're looking for when to prune, we always recommend this time of the season. I think once we were in a magazine and they asked us all these different questions, and we answered all the different questions, and then in the article they said, fall's the time for pruning. we don't recommend fall pruning for Japanese maples, so spring is the very best time. People often worry and say they're bleeding out. It doesn't hurt the tree. It's actually the best time when they heal the quickest. Now there's a number of different reasons, like we talked about, for pruning. One is to increase that vigor. 2 is to remove branches that you don't like. 3, to remove dead wood that may have happened from a frost or something like that. And so there's a lot of different reasons why you may prune. One thing to keep in mind is pruning is good for the health of the plant. It's one of those things that people don't do enough of. You start to see a lot of twiggy growth. Those plants start to slow down quite a bit in growth. If you prune a Japanese maple, it encourages a lot of growth. And so it's a great thing to do to help that plant really have some vigor and keep growing and make a nice, beautiful tree out in the landscape and garden. And also, this is a thing that really can become an art form. I'm no artist, but there are some people out there that will take a Japanese maple, prune it and shape it, and turn it into a beautiful masterpiece. I mean, shout out to Chris Jewell if you've seen some of his posts on Facebook of him pruning some large weeping lace leaves. I mean, there's some people out there that really know what they're doing when it comes to shaping and pruning Japanese maples, so you can take this as far as you want to go. What we're talking about today is basically general care and generally how you should prune a Japanese maple, why you should prune it, when you should prune it, and just some tips so that you can get more confidence when you're pruning a Japanese maple.
Yeah, I know the most controversial thing will be the timing of it in our video. That's the thing everybody will argue about. You certainly can prune in other times of the year. You know, we're not saying it's not possible. You can take your trimmers and do whatever you want any time of the year, so it certainly is possible. These are the things we've seen to give you the best success. And so it's actually a nurseryman trick to prune in early spring, because that immediate flush is going to create some of the best new growth and some of the most vibrant colors. And it's a way to increase the overall health of your tree. Also, when pruning in late fall is going to open your tree up to, you know, bugs and things that can find those wounds more readily available. We're here in early March right now, actually mid-March, those things aren't out in the landscape right now. We're not having as many things that are boring or looking for those open wounds. So it's just a preventative measure, but it's also the time when it's going to flush the best after that. So,
And now a word from our sponsors.
hey, today's video is brought to you from those great people at MrMaple.com. MrMaple.com is a great place to find Japanese maples. With over 1,000 varieties, you're sure to find a Japanese maple that's just right for you.
Make sure to like this video, comment on this video, share this video with your gardening friends. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and most importantly, you're subscribed to our weekly emails on Mr. Maple. We had 10 new exciting trees every Tuesday at 10 a.m. That's something you'll want to check out.
Hey, thanks to MrMaple.com for sponsoring this video.
Some may take pruning during late summer as a bonsai method to actually reduce the overall growth of a tree. And you can do that in a container or in the landscape. Typically to increase vigor, to make a healthier plant that's going to grow faster, that's going to have a lot more branching from the pruning, the best time to prune it is right now, right as those buds are swelling on the trees, right before they start busting open and leafing out.
Yeah, that's a great point to remember. You know, pruning in that late summer after the flushes have hardened off will reduce the overall size of the tree, so you're taking energy away from the plant. Now, pruning in this early March time frame is going to increase energy to the plant. You're actually going to increase that root ball, and you're going to increase that secondary flush. So that tree is going to leaf out with a huge push. So you're actually increasing the growth of the tree versus slowing the tree down. So it is something to remember. If if you're not going to be somebody who's going to maintain pruning, you might not want to be pruning in early March because you are going to increase the vigor of your tree. So if your goal is to decrease the vigor of your tree, maybe early March isn't your time frame. You know, late summer can happen, but it is a little bit more tricky. So that's something we do recommend. There's all kind of different techniques with bonsai pruning. You can learn more about that. What we're covering here today mostly will be the early spring pruning, and we think it's a great way to add vigor to your tree and to get a better overall Japanese maple.
Also, we love this time of the season because there's no leaves on the tree. So you can actually see the branches and see the structure so much better to get in there and make some pruning. Now, let's go ahead and tell them a little bit about some of the tools of the trade and what we use when we are actually pruning this time of the year.
Hey, we'll zoom in on some of these too, but first off, we'll start out with our bonsai pruners. These are a concave bonsai pruner that we use. We typically use a Joshua Roth, but sometimes you can find cheaper brands that work pretty good. These are basically a stainless steel concave pruner used in bonsai for the most part, but you can make some really detailed, intricate cuts. Now, the thing to be conscious of with these, you don't want to cut anything big. You're going to waste your money if you cut anything large with these because you're going to break the pruner. So if you're cutting anything, I would even say much bigger than a pencil with these, you're probably wasting your time because you're just going to have to buy another pair of pruners. Trust me, I've done it, so don't do it.
And then Matt's also got the pass-throughs over there. Now the pass-throughs are good for something a little bit larger, something that doesn't need to be as intricate of a cut. And it's a great tool. If you start going anything bigger than your pinky, you need to bring out a saw. I mean, we're not going to be pruning anything that's bigger than a pinky today, but if you are pruning bigger than that, bring out a saw, make sure it's very sharp. Now, the one thing to always remember is one of the most important tools that people forget when they're pruning is rubbing alcohol and a towel. We often use some paper towels because we can wet the rubbing alcohol. We need to be cleaning our tools constantly. You got to think about when you're pruning a Japanese maple, what are you normally pruning? A lot of times you may be pruning dead growth in plants all around your yard with your saws, with your pruners, and you got to remember to keep these tools clean, because that dead growth may be dying because it has something wrong with it. And you may be spreading that from tree to tree as you're going around and making these cuts. So you got to remember, we're making surgical cuts here. We want to be as clean as possible during this entire time. It's really important to clean your tools before you start this, to clean them after you're done, and also during the process, just to make sure that we're not spreading anything that, if you're cutting out dead wood, it could be dead for a reason other than just a late frost or something like that. You want to be very, very careful this entire process.
Yeah, we typically clean our pruners in between each tree as we've moved on to the next tree. We'll stop and clean the trimmers in between. As Tim said, basically the thing to remember is you're cleaning out the least desirable wood. So you're cleaning out the branches that you don't want in the tree, and that may be for any reason. It could be for bacteria. It could be for dieback. So we're going to clean those out, then we're going to clean our tree, or clean our trimmers, to make sure we're not spreading it to the next plant.
And that's probably, I think, is one of the biggest tips that people forget, is using something like alcohol, rubbing alcohol, to clean those pruners. Some people use a bleach solution. We recommend the rubbing alcohol. You can often find that really easy. Plus, you don't have to worry about it staining your clothes a lot of times as you're running around from tree to tree. And excellent thing you can use. But the most underutilized tool in pruning, but the most important. One of the top questions that we get about pruning is how much can I prune from a Japanese maple at one time? And the answer varies a little bit, but during this time of the year, we don't want to prune out more than 40% of the Japanese maple. During the summer, it's even less. So if you want to do more and more work on your tree, remember, it's not just 1 year that you can prune. You can prune this year, make some major adjustments with 40%, and then next year go back and make more adjustments during that this time of the year next year. And if you want to make some minor adjustments, you can do that during the summer. But remember, you're typically reducing growth whenever you're pruning during the summer. You're encouraging growth this time of the season.
Yeah, oftentimes people will send me a photo of their Japanese maple they pruned, and I'll say, hey, go back and prune it again when you're angry, because it doesn't look like you did enough. You know, people are so afraid to trim Japanese maples. I would say it's one of the fears people have the most. I was visiting the great Pearl Friar down at his place in Bishopville with those topiary gardens that are just amazing that Pearl Friar created. And he was showing me around, and I was explaining to him what I do. And he said, I've got one tree in my garden my wife won't let me prune, and it's a Japanese maple. So don't be afraid to prune Japanese maples. You just have to have the key basics in place there, and that's going to give you good success. The reason we say to do it at this time of the year is because we want to give you the best success rate and make it the easiest possible. And this is when it's going to be the easiest time with the best success rate. So we've talked a little bit about when to prune. We've talked a little bit about why we prune. Now let's get into a little bit about what we prune. So the first thing to look for with pruning a Japanese maple is taking out the dead or damaged growth. You know, it's not uncommon for Japanese maples to have a little bit of twig dieback, especially in those zone 5 and zone 6 environments. Our winters are conducive to have a little bit of twig dieback. That's typically not something super damaging on a mature plant. You can kind of see it a little bit in most gardens, but you can take out anything that's already dried or crunchy. So if it already has dried or crunchy bark to it, don't be afraid to go ahead and remove that. You can actually remove dried or crunchy growth any time of the year because that growth's already dead and it's just robbing the tree of energy. So go ahead and remove that. It's going to improve the overall health and look of the tree. So anything that's dried or crunchy, you can kind of take it and scratch it and see if it looks like it's dried and crunchy. You can go ahead and start to remove that part.
This is something that with Japanese maples, it's not something to be that scared of. We were told once years ago that the Japanese method was to break everything by hand. And when we went to Japan and actually learned how to train, we were trained in Japan a little bit on how to prune a Japanese maple. They do it just like us. They use concave pruners and they get in there and they clean out a lot of the twiggy growth and dead wood and a lot of these things we'll be talking about today.
Don't be afraid to prune. That's the main thing. You know, doing it at the right time is the key. That's going to give you the best success. And if you're doing it at the right time and you're just following these basic skills, you're not going to mess it up too bad. You know, the good thing about nature is it regrows. It's like a haircut. This is going to come back. You know, we're giving you the principles to it. You certainly want to be careful about, you know, how you're doing it, and we'll explain some of the things to avoid doing as well. But we're giving you the basics here today so that you'll have more confidence in how to prune. It's very easy to do.
So we're standing here with Acer palmatum nanyat here at Maplewood Gardens. This is a green bark variety. We chose this tree because you can see its bark real well against the backdrop here, so it stands out a little bit. But last year, right as these trees were leafing out, we had a heavy frost. So then,
not just a heavy frost, we had like 18 degrees, and then 2 weeks later, we had like 20 degrees in late March. So we had 2 back-to-back freezes.
And because of that,
excuse me, late April.
Yeah, so because of that, we had some damage on this new growth on a lot of the plants here on this side of the gardens at Maplewood Gardens. And you'll notice this is dead wood from right here to right here. And so this is actually the wood that we'll be taking out first. This is the dead wood. This is wood that got damaged from the frost last year that we want to remove because all this is doing is actually taking energy away from the plant. So it's best to go in there and take those out as the very first thing. This dead wood, if you see that, there's no reason for it to leave it on the tree. This is the very first thing to prune.
Now there's some key factors in determining what to prune out of your Japanese maple. I would say first and foremost amongst those is what does your cultivar supposed to look like? You know your cultivar, know what you're starting with. You're not going to prune an Anabashidare to look like a Seryu. You're going to be in a losing battle there. So know your cultivar. You can research on MrMaple.com and kind of read some of the basics of what that cultivar should be doing. And that'll give you a format for what you want to do and what you want to enhance. Because when we're pruning, we're basically enhancing those traits that cultivar already has. So you don't want to have to reinvent the wheel here. If you're trying to prune an Emperor 1 to be a Kiyohime, you're going to lose that battle. It's not going to work out very well for you. It certainly could happen, but you're going to have to prune all the time, and it's not really going to fit what you're trying to work with. So pick what the cultivar is and try to accentuate that natural growth rate of that cultivar and make it better. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is taking out twiggier growth, and that's going to push a ton of growth into your energy, into your plant. I would say one thing as another key piece of advice is let your plant grow before you start to trim it. Don't be too rushed to get into pruning it. We typically don't prune any Japanese maples here until they're past a 7-gallon size. And that's because we want to let the natural growth rate of that cultivar take over. We want the uprights to be uprights. We don't want them to be round balls. So we kind of let the natural growth rate of that plant take over. So if you're planting a new plant in your ground, I definitely wouldn't recommend pruning a 1-gallon, maybe even a 2-gallon skip on. 3 gallons you can start to play with the shape a little bit, but you kind of want to let that natural beauty develop, because we can't beat nature even with the best pruners. So
yeah, the only things you want to prune on a younger plant is if you want a central leader and you're developing a second leader. I mean, that's basically the only things that you want to prune on a young plant. Other than that, let it develop and then start pruning from its natural shape, because that will lead you into making the best plant out there.
Now, we talked about vigor. The easiest way to get vigor of the spring garden is cutting out the twiggy growth. Twiggy growth just kind of robs Japanese maples of their new growth flushes, and by taking some of that out, you can really increase the overall growth rate.
Now, when we talk about twiggier growth, we're talking about this area of growth right in here. And you'll notice that this growth right in here is something that it's much smaller, it's very thin, and the growth from it is not very thick. Whenever you have the growth from the thicker branching, you actually get more growth overall from the plant. And the xylem flow, which is how the plant takes water and nutrients, is more efficient in this branching. And that's the reason why this branching up here is growing faster, while this branch over here is becoming more twiggy. When we prune out this growth down here, this twiggier growth, you will get more growth overall for this plant, and it'll make a larger tree much quicker.
So the next thing we'll go over is conflicting branches. So Japanese maples often will get conflicting branches, or branches that are going to be rubbing or touching long term. And you may want to take those out just to create a more open aesthetic to your Japanese maple. Sometimes it's more desirable to be able to see that whole structure. And so by taking out branches that are growing back toward the base of the plant, you can create a better overall looking plant.
Yeah, we've got some branches on this that are conflicting coming on right in here. And they're actually touching and rubbing against each other. And it's easy just to go in, take one of those out, choose one that you like better, one you think can develop and make a better tree from having those branches. Take out the ones you don't like, and that's going to be one of the great things about this, is taking that out and giving that more open aesthetic. When we were in Japan, their open aesthetic is based on how the sunlight comes in and will each of the branches hit sunlight. And that's more of the natural style of pruning, is seeing what sunlight will actually hit what branches, and prune out the other branches that aren't getting hit by that sunlight. When you have that conflicting branches, there's no way that both those trees are getting the sunlight to even have that natural aesthetic. And it just looks a little more conflicting because those branches are touching.
Yeah, you can clean up that overall growth, make a more appealing looking tree. Now, one more little pro tip for pruning Japanese maples: if you're pruning off the underside of the branching, you can often hide those cuts. So if you're in a garden that you want to hide those cuts, pruning on the lower side of the branching is a great way to remove the branching. So if you're deciding between two branches, often picking the branch that's coming out from the lower part will give you a better overall aesthetic. So here we have a little bit of new growth, and something to be conscious of when we're cutting this new growth is it's going to die back to that next set of buds. So when we have two sets of buds here and we prune above that, we're going to get a little bit of dieback to that next set of buds. So for cutting in this area, we don't want to cut exactly up against it, but it's typically going to dry that tip back to that next set of buds there, and then both those are going to flush out and form new branches. So a great way to avoid conflicting branches is to go ahead and preemptively remove branches that are headed back toward the interior of the plant. So you can find branches that you know are going to head back toward the base and remove those. And by doing that, you're going to open up that structure of the plant, and you're going to create a little bit more of that light Tim was talking about, and you're going to be able to see into the plant a little bit better.
Right here, you can see this branch coming here is headed back towards the interior part of the plant. It really doesn't add a lot to the shape. In fact, it actually makes it a little bit of a conflict, because it's going to run into these other branches as it develops further branches. So like right here, we can come in and take out this bigger branch, even though it's headed towards the interior of the plant. So when we come in and make this cut, we want to leave a little bit of room, as this is going to die back just a little bit, and we don't want to cut too much into this tree because that will cause a place where it's harder for it to heal, and can cause an indentation in the tree that just looks really unnatural. And by doing this here, this will die back just a little bit and start to smooth over time. Often when pruning an upright Japanese maple, you have to make a choice on where the central leader is going to be. Right here, we already have a central leader on this plant. We've got one main leader here and two side leaders. Now, if you prune out these top leaders, what's going to happen is it's going to encourage a lot of growth, side growth down here. So if you're looking for a tree to put on a lot of side growth, you can often prune back those leaders, but you will be diminishing the overall height of that plant and encouraging a lot more side growth. On the opposite side of things, if you come in here and you prune out a lot of these side growths while leaving thicker leaders and higher leaders, you're going to get a lot more height out of this plant very quickly.
Yeah, taking out that central leader can make a tree smaller overall. You're basically, there's a lot of information in the upper part of that plant that's telling the tree, hey, let's keep taking off and growing up. In an established plant, you want to keep your central leader as your uppermost point, and then kind of trim that tree to that central leader so you can create that focal point and that drop point for the tree. Now, be conscious of letting the tree grow for a little while to determine its own central leader. If we're forcing a central leader, sometimes another one will still become dominant, and you'll get that side branch that becomes way larger than the rest. So it's another good case for kind of not pruning a tree when it's too young. Kind of let it get a little bit developed first so you can kind of see what the central leader wants to be itself.
And don't be worried on a 1 gallon plant if you prune out a central leader or somehow that the top snaps off during shipping. Japanese maples have a dominant central leader they develop naturally. And sometimes nurserymen will go in and prune the top out of a Japanese maple to get it to flush a lot of growth sideways in a young plant. That's not going to affect the overall height of a plant at a young age. That's not going to affect the overall shape. That's just going to give you more branching. So that's something to keep in mind too. What we're talking about today is on a plant that's established in the landscape, whether or not you're going to encourage a lot of side branching or a lot of upright habit.
Yeah, that's a great point. We'll often trim grafts back heavily to increase the flushes of growth on them. So we'll actually cut those to develop a stronger central leader and then cut those to develop kind of a break point. So the next step is taking out the branches that you don't like. It's impossible to finish somebody else's painting. It's also impossible to prune somebody else's tree because you're going to see branches that you like that the next person may see and think that looks amazing. So you really can't prune somebody else's tree and you really can't finish somebody else's painting, right? So it's kind of that kind of artwork. So at this stage, it's a good time to go ahead and take out any branches that are bugging you or you don't think are desirable. And what you're going to do by doing it at the right time of the year like we're talking about is put that energy into the parts of the tree you want. So you're basically going to take that branch away and you're going to say, hey, let's put all that energy into the part I like about this plant and take it away from the part I don't like. So don't be afraid to take out those bad branches. It's really important when being recorded filming pruning a tree to have really good guitar face or just Mr. Miyagi serious face.
We learned very early, if you go prune on someone else's tree, even a friend who says, hey, you want to come prune on my tree? We go to prune on it and they're standing out there and with each cut they're like, ooh, because they're worried about the cuts, they don't see the vision. You've got to take your own vision on how you want this tree pruned and prune it. Take out the branches you don't like because they're only going to get bigger. Leave the branches that you like and develop the shapes that you want to develop with those trees. So that's something to always keep in mind. And always keep in mind, if you're pruning on your friend's tree for them, tell them to go inside and wait until you're done. So that you can put your full vision into the tree until the project's completed.
Hey, and another thing to be conscious of when you're pruning in this March time frame, you're pruning for that new growth flush. So the tree might not necessarily look completely finished when you finish pruning. That the second part of that is allowing the tree to do its thing and flush that new growth out. Hey, thanks for watching this video. We hope this gave you some confidence in pruning Japanese maples, and we just appreciate watching our general tips and care for Japanese maples. Today we talked more about uprights. We may get more into lace leaves in our next video, as there's some different aesthetics you want to go to. Always be conscious of the cultivar, like we said, and how to prune that cultivar to get the desired shape for that specific type of tree. We hope this gave you some confidence though.
Yeah, I hope a lot of our tips really helps you understand the intricacies of pruning. Remember that if you are pruning today, it's a time that you're trying to promote growth here in this early springtime. It's also a great time to fertilize. So if you're trying to promote growth, fertilizer is a great way to do it. Check out our video on fertilizing Japanese maples.
Thanks for watching.
God bless.
And have a great day.